Now what? If you are visiting with us today, first time you've been here at the church, we go through different things that we do to get to the message, and this is that time where we have the message. So the answer to that question of now what is, it's message time. You can turn in your Bibles to Genesis, first book of the Bible, chapter 39, which is where we will start. And we will answer, hopefully, that question today as to now what. My name is Pastor John. For those of you who don't know, I am the lead pastor here at High Point Christian Church. And we're going to dive into today one of the questions that we don't even realize that we ask many times, and yet comes up every single day. And that question is simply, now what? On Saturday, Becca ended her year for volleyball, JO volleyball. Now what? On Monday, Chandler, my oldest son, came back from college. Now what? On Tuesday, Jacob's baseball season ended and his athletic career ended at Manchester High School. Now what? On Tuesday, Deanna gets called down to the office, the principal's office. That doesn't ever want to happen whether you're a kid or a teacher. The bad thing was the superintendent was going to be there as well. And because of budget cuts and because of the numbers game and her not having enough seniority, she walked out of there without a position as a teacher for next year. Asking the question, now what? Yesterday, Becca ended basketball. Now what? Thursday night, Jacob graduates from high school. Now what? Him and 100 other people all walking off the stage with their diploma going, now what? Now what? Now what? Now what? Now what? All this time, all these questions, every day in these moments of our life that we have that question to answer, now what? So how is it that each one of us can deal with that question? Because we're going to ask it. We're going to ask it when it comes to raising our kids. We're going to ask it after having our first child and after going home for the first time. We're going to ask it after having 2 kids and 3 kids. We're going to ask it when our kids struggle and get into trouble. We're going to ask it when school ends and all of a sudden they're home for hours and hours. We're going to ask it when that customer walks through that door that, oh my goodness, it's the last person that I wanted to see today. When we're dealing with coworkers, when we're at school, when we're out of school, when we're in a community, now what, now what, now what? Well, the example that we're going to use is from a guy by the name of Joseph, and it's going to be in the Old Testament once again in chapter 39. But how is it that we as believers, how is it that we take a step every day and answer that simple question? I've talked with people over time and they've shared with me difficult moments that they've got through in life, whether they've lost someone, they've had a loss in their life, they've had a struggle, they've had a setback, they've had a job loss, they've struggled with their finances, whatever it may be. And they've said to me over and over that I can answer that question, now what, because of the faith that I have. And inevitably, every time there's people in their lives as well that come into for just a season, into their lives for just a season, that they see that don't get through that question of now what, and are able to answer it by having that faith. And so they see them struggle in those moments. And they see them continue to struggle after those moments. And many times they lose contact with them, and yet they think back about those people and they wonder, how is it that they get through the moments of the day when they don't have an answer to that question of now what, that doesn't include them trying to fix it on their own. So if you're not a believer today, at some point in some time, you've got to answer that question, now what, when it comes to your life. If you're not resolved with God, if you've never taken that step, and you've never taken that step of faith to ask Him into your life, by the end of this message today, the question to you is, now what? What is it you're going to do with the message that you hear today? And as a believer, what is it you're going to do with this message to take it to those that need to not only see it, but to watch you live it every single day in a world that doesn't have a lot of light, in a world that doesn't have a lot of hope? We pick up the story. This is a gentleman by the name of Joseph, and he is a 17-year-old. So he would be much like my son Jacob, to where he may have just walked across the podium and he's graduated from high school and he's moving on, except for something happened in his life. His brothers decided to play a trick on him. They threw him into a cistern. It had no water in it, so the bottom's a dried up well, and he is literally at the bottom of this well just waiting for them to pull him out. And so they pull him out, and he thinks, okay, everything's good now. But the brothers disliked him so much, in fact, hatred so much, that they sold him to the Ishmaelites, who are going to take him to a country that he's never been to. He's going to take him to a country that doesn't have a Bible. They're going to take him to a country where he doesn't know the language. And he's going to go to a country where he has no family. So as he's thrown into the cistern, he has to ask that question, well, now what? And as he's pulled out and he thinks it's over and he's got the answer to his question, okay, now we're done with this joke. He gets thrown into the back of this cavern, some type of trailer or something. They're taking everyone along, and he gets thrown in with all these guys that he doesn't know, and he's being taken away, and he keeps waiting for the joke to end, and yet it doesn't. So now what? And he goes to this country where, once again, he can't speak the language, he doesn't have a Bible, and so he has to answer the question, now what? No family, no one is around him. How is it that we would react? How is it that you would react knowing the situation that Joseph was in if you were in that same situation? Now some of you would say, I would never hate my brother or my sister to that point where I would do that to them. And if I asked you to look back and say, well, could there be a time where you disliked them so much that maybe you would have done something kind of like that? Maybe not that bad, but kind of along those lines? And your answer would probably, well, yeah, there was that one time. Well, maybe it was 2 times. Okay, 5 times. Listen, not more than 10. Didn't happen more than 10 times. And some of you are sitting there right now going, you know what? I wouldn't mind selling him into slavery right now if I could get him to go to another country or her to go to another country. I'm good with that for a couple of years. But know this, on top of everything, they played this off like their brother was killed. And so they took that to his dad and took this wonderful coat that he had that his dad had given him, because he was the dad's favorite. And everyone knows who's mom and dad's favorite, or at least they think that it is, right? So if you have a brother and sister, oh, this one's dad's favorite. Oh, this one's mom's favorite. Oh, this is our parents' favorite. Oh, this is, and my kids do this to me all the time. That will say to me, okay, Dad, am I your favorite? Because I think I'm your favorite. And I'll say, I think you are my favorite daughter. Those of you who don't know, I only have one daughter. Nathan, hey, I'm mom's favorite. I'm mom's favorite. And Dan will turn and say, you know what, Nathan, you're my favorite 15-year-old. We only have one 15-year-old. Jake, well, you know what, I'm middle college, I'm no one's favorite. Jake, you are our favorite high school graduate. You are our favorite. And Chandler comes walking in and we're like, oh, we haven't seen you in a couple months. Chandler, right? Yeah, you are our favorite college baseball player. You're our favorite college kid. And so they all had that role of being a favorite in a different way. Well, Joseph was not like this. Every one of his brothers knew that Joseph was the favorite of the 12 children. He wasn't the youngest, but he was the favorite. And the reason he was a favorite is because Jacob didn't think he was going to have any more children, but when he was older, he had this child in his old age, and all of a sudden he realized, wow, here's new life in his body. It's bringing new life into my body. It's bringing new life into my family. And he became his favorite, and everybody knew it. And on top of it, he would give coats to his kids that knew, so you knew that it was Jacob's children. He gave Joseph a special coat that had multiple colors on it. And it even set him aside within the family. So everybody knew that it was Jacob's favorite. And because of that, his brothers and sisters, the more they were around him, the less they liked him. And the less they liked him, it got to the point of being hatred. And the only one that watched out for him was his oldest brother, and yet he still pretty much disliked him as much as you could dislike a person. So now Joseph has been sold, and he is heading off to Egypt, and he's being taken there for one reason and one reason only, and that is to be sold into slavery. Now his brothers have never thought about that. They don't care about him being sold into slavery. All they know is they have just made some money. They get to split it up with one another. They get to run off to Circle K and buy Polar Pops and beef jerky and have a good old time and never worry about seeing him again. This is their day in the sun and they're enjoying it. And they finally got rid of this one that is called the Dreamer, Dad's favorite. So now maybe we can finally get a little bit of time with Dad. And maybe we can be his favorite a little bit. And so they passed this thing off as one big scam, and their dad has bought it. And so here's Joseph picked up at the beginning of chapter 39. And it says, now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. Potiphar, an Egyptian who was one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. So now, in a matter of a few days, Joseph has been sold twice. He's been sold first to this caravan and this trailer that's been taken away, and their job is to go out to collect young men that are strong, that look like they're strong, that can do hard work and hard labor, because they're going to take them to Egypt to sell them into slavery. So now here's the second time that he's already been sold. And it says, the very next verse, it says this, and it starts off with this. It says, the Lord was with Joseph. I want you to look back into your life right now as to the worst thing that any of your siblings has ever done to you. The worst trick that they ever played on you, the worst prank that they ever played on you, the worst thing that they've ever said, the worst thing that they've ever done, when they lock your keys in your car on purpose by throwing the keys in first and then locking the door, when they moved your car 3 miles away and took the keys through them so you didn't know where your car was, whatever the prank might be that they pulled on you that was funny, when they did that, they threw ice cubes in your bed in the morning and ice water all over you to wake you up, whatever it is that they could do to make you mad. This is the worst thing that they've ever done. And ask yourself, is it anything in comparison to being sold into slavery, not once, but twice, with no hope of ever coming back? And if you look at that time when it was so bad, would you look at that time in your life and say, you know what? The best thing about it was, I knew that my brother or my sister was terrible to me, but I knew that God was with me. And the answer for most of us would be, I've never even considered that until now. I didn't look at it like, hey God, at least you're alongside of me. Hey God, I know that you're here with me. Hey, they're being the biggest jerks in the world, but you know what? The one thing I've got going for me is I've got you alongside me. Because for many of us as believers, that isn't how we think. And yet here is this young man, 17 years of age, sold 2 times within just a couple of days of each other. He is now a slave, which is probably going to be for the rest of his life because he's a Hebrew in this Egyptian nation. There's no possible way out. There's no Bible to read. There's no one to turn to. There's no mentor. There's no one that can even speak the language he is speaking, and yet it says, the Lord is with me. You're Joseph right now. How many of you right now are really feeling the Lord is with you? Come on. You're Joseph right now. How many of you are really feeling like the Lord is with you? You're not feeling that, are you? When you take this to modern day time, I'm not feeling like, hey, but the one thing I have is that God is with me. But Joseph is at this point now where he's got to say, well, now what? They've been sold once, now what? I've been sold again, now what? And yet it says in the Bible that the Lord was with him. It says that he prospered, he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. When his master saw that the Lord was with him and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. So now Joseph has this job. He not only is something special as far as seen within the eyes of Potiphar, but he is actually overseeing his household. He became his attendant. He became his assistant. So Potiphar sees something special in this young man. And so he elevates him, even though he can't speak the language. Even though he can't communicate necessarily with him, there's something special that he sees about Joseph. What is it that he sees? He says the Lord was with him and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did. Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household and he entrusted to his care everything that he owned. Everything. There was nothing that he couldn't care for that he owned. Hey, you know what, Joseph? I've got the back 40 acres right here. I'm entrusting those to you. Make sure that they get cut. Make sure that all the fields get picked. Make sure all that stuff gets handled. Over here's my barn. Make sure that the barn is painted. Make sure everything's good. You've got all these guys to help you make sure it's good to go. Here's my house. I want the landscaping to look good. Make sure the lawn looks good in the front. Oh, over here in the driveway, here's my cars and my boat. Make sure those are nice and shiny. You can handle all that stuff. You're good. I'm entrusting everything I have to you because there's something special about you. Potiphar put him in charge of the household and he entrusted to his care everything he owned. From the time he put him in charge of the household and of all he owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. And let's stop here for a moment. Many of us, this is why we stop many times in working hard. Many of us, this is why we stop in putting in the extra effort. Many of us, this is why we don't take the extra step. We don't step up a little bit further. Because we get so tired of being a great example, and of being a light, and of being a hope, and of showing that example, and of loving people because we're called to love others, and being a little bit different, and not using the same language that everyone else is using, and not talking about the same things that everyone is talking about, and trying to separate us from all the riffraff and all the drama, and do all those things so that people may see a little bit of hope through us, and may see a little bit of light, because somebody else gets promoted through it. The Lord was with Joseph, and yet the Lord blessed Potiphar's house. He blessed the Egyptian's house. He blessed the non-believer. I work so hard, And here I am working my tail off, and this guy's driving the Mercedes. And this guy has the great wife. And I'm working 80 hours a week, and I'm single. I can't tell you the last time that I met a girl. I can't tell you the last time that I met a guy. I can't tell you any of those other things, because all I do is I work, and I'm a great example, and they get everything. And they get promoted, and they get the good stuff. And I'm left here sitting going, are you kidding me? What's in it for me? What's my next step? Why isn't anybody noticing? And yet, Joseph is someone at the age of 17 that understands that no matter what he says, no matter who he's around, no matter the position that he's in, that when he stops to ask him the question, now what? That he can say, I will do whatever it takes because I know that the Lord is with me. When he's sold into slavery, it's potluck. We don't know what he's going to be doing. We don't know where it is that he is going to work. And yet God put him amongst a guy that could oversee him, who was considered rich in Egypt, who had everything possible that you could ask for. And because of that, this man was blessed, and those blessings came downhill to Joseph. And Joseph was provided for every single day. Give us this day our daily bread. Whoa, 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 but that guy's getting a promotion. Give us this day our daily bread. Wait, but that guy's getting more vacation time than I am. Give us this day our daily bread. Wait a second, that guy passed right through me and passed right by me. I was the good example. I did all the right things. I. Joseph didn't do that. Joseph was secure enough into who he was that he understood that the bottom line was, when the question came to now what, that he was going to act in such a way that he knew the Lord was with him. And that those around him also knew the Lord was with him. This is not a believer. And yet he entrusted him with everything because he could see something different about him. They didn't speak the same language. They wouldn't go to the same church. They wouldn't even pray to the same God. And there's something special about him. Is there something special about us? Is there something special about us in our classrooms that even though the teacher's talking about evolution, there's no such thing as creation, we're just not going to argue with them, but we're going to be the best example we can be because we know in a classroom setting, the argument, the teacher's going to win no matter what. When we're at work and people are dropping GD and JC and it just makes our skin crawl, do we want to get an argument back and forth so they can bring up stuff going, hey, do you eat bacon? Yeah, I eat bacon. Well, then you're not following what the Bible says because in the Old Testament, nobody ate pork, so you're going to hell now. And going back and forth in different arguments like that. And we have them all the time because people want to ask questions and they want to throw it back into our face. Or do we act in such a way so that people can see something about us that is different? And as we walk, that they know that the Lord is with us. It continues and it says this. It says, from the time he put him in charge of his household and of all that he owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. His gain was not personal. His gain was not in his bank account. His gain was not in all the things that he had from a material side. His gain came from the contentment that he had in his Maker. From the contentment that he had in the one that he believed was watching over him every day. As Jesus said, and the one that provides the daily bread. 1 Timothy 6:6 says this, godliness with contentment is great gain. I'm not worried about the gain that I have, and because of what I get, then I'm content. It's because of focusing on God and what he is doing in my life that I am content, and through that, I have great gain. Joseph didn't know Jesus. Joseph didn't even know there was going to be a Jesus. Joseph had no idea about the whole Messiah anything. Joseph just lived every single day with what he was taught through his father, and he believed and he entrusted him enough to say that I'm going to live my life every day as if the Lord is with me. And then he went out and did so. The story continues. It says, the blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had. Which seems completely unfair, doesn't it? The blessing of the Lord was on everything that Potiphar had. It says, both in the house and in the field. So he left in Joseph's care everything he had. With Joseph in charge, he did not concern himself with anything except for the food that he ate. So his whole life, everything this guy is doing, he has found this one guy that can take over everything, and all he worries about is what he's going to have for the food that day to eat. That's it. That's all I'm concerned about. What are we having for dinner tonight? We're having steak. Oh, good. I love steak. Great. What'd you worry about today? Nothing. What are you going to worry about tomorrow? Nothing. What about this weekend? I'm not worried about anything. Right now, I'm just worried about eating this steak. It's a pretty good day, pretty good job, got a pretty good position. Well, why? Why are you so content with everything you have? Because of that guy. I just know there's something special about him. I don't know what it is, but when I see him, man, I'm like, oh, I can't wait to talk to him. Joseph, how's the day going? Oh, it's going good. Back 40's covered. Your car's shined. It's in the driveway. Everything's good. Great. Let's have a steak. Come on, come sit down. How many of you know someone like that? How many of you work with someone like that? How many of you have someone in your life that's like that where you're like, I can't wait to see them. I can't wait to be around them. I can't wait for the holidays so I see Uncle Tony. I can't wait for the holidays so I can see Grandma. I can't wait so I can get back from college to see my mom or to sit down with her. She's my best friend and she's my mom. We have those people in our lives and for some reason, they are so content in whose they are. They are so content in whose they are because of who they are, and they know that the Lord is working through them. And there's something about it that is special for each one of us. And so why is it that they have this special something? I would challenge you and say that that person that you're thinking of right now in your life is someone that every day has answered the question of, well, now what? And they've said, you know what? I'm going to walk today as if I know that the Lord is with me. I may not have the greatest of everything, but I'll tell you what, I've got more love in my heart to share with more people and to show them that love that they can see a difference in me. We are called to be a hope and a light. Do you bring that hope and light into your workplace? Do you bring that hope and light into your hallways? Do you bring that hope and light to the team that you play with? Do you bring that hope and light to your children, to your grandchildren? Do you bring that hope and light to the graduate? Do you bring that hope and light to the person that is standing there before you going, well, now what? Now what? Now what do I do? Now where do I go? Do we bring that hope and light to the person that is anxious, to the person that worries, to the person that doubts, to the person that loses their job, to the person that sees a downturn in the economy, to the person that can't help their kids, the person that can't find a way to make peace? Do we bring that to them in such a way that they can see through us that they would just trust in the Lord? That they can answer that simple question of now what? Now, you would think at this point that the story would turn. Joseph would get out of being a slave for the rest of his life. He would go back to his brothers. They'd have a huge family reunion. They'd all have steaks together because Potiphar knows that he's got to have a family somewhere. He just didn't show up here. But what happens next? Potiphar's wife knows that this is a good-looking guy. And so all of a sudden, she starts hitting on him. And he knows there's certain things you don't mess with. And the one thing he's not going to mess with is his master's wife. And so he does whatever he can to stay away from her. And he keeps staying away from her to the point where he says, I'm not even going to be around her. But one day he has to be in the house, and she grabs a hold of him, and he runs. But when he runs, she pulls the cloak off him. Now this is not the cloak that Jacob gave him. That cloak has long been gone. This is the cloak that Potiphar gave him. And so when Potiphar shows up, she says, look, your servant that you trust so much, you think is so cool, that washes your car and brings you steak dinners, yeah, he's trying to do things to me that you shouldn't even know about. And he's really bad. And so what does Potiphar do? He believes her. And so he gets so mad, he throws Joseph into jail. And so now here's Joseph. We don't know how long this was taking. If it's a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 months, whatever it might be. We still have him as a teenager at this time. That's roughly all we know. So now Joseph has been sold into slavery twice, and now he is thrown into jail. And at the very end of chapter 39, starting in verse 19, it says, when his master heard the story, his wife told him, saying, this is how your slave treated me. He burned with anger. Joseph's master took him and put him in the prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. He's in prison with the worst of the worst guys. He's in the central part of this prison where nobody's getting out, where nobody's trusted, where everyone is looked down upon. These guys are bad guys, and they're never getting out because you messed with the king. And remember, this isn't the king. This isn't Pharaoh. This guy's thrown in with those same people. This is how bad of a person Joseph is seen right now. And the very next verse says this, "But while Joseph was there in prison, the Lord was with him." Does that make sense to anybody? You've been put into slavery twice. You did nothing wrong. She hit on you. It's been turned back on you somehow. You're thrown in the worst part of prison. And yet, hey, God is with me. And yet Joseph is someone that when the question came up, well, now what? He is someone that is going to act in such a way that the Lord is with him. Because just as Potiphar entrusted everything to Joseph, Joseph has entrusted everything he is and he is about to the Lord. It says the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. Great job, Joseph. You're 17 and your best friend is the prison warden. You got that going for you. That'll look good on a resume. This is where he's at right now. And the next verse says, "So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in the prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care." Why? Because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. You've just been thrown into prison. For some of you, rewind back to when you're 17 years of age. You're a junior or senior in high school, and you're just getting out of school. And you've just been thrown into the worst part of prison. And it says, Joseph was successful in whatever he did. Are you feeling successful right now? I am such a great success. My best friend's a warden. I'm in prison. I'm probably never going to get out. I'm never going to see my family again. I still can't speak the language. I'm in the worst part of the prison with the worst guys ever. And yet, when people look at him, they see him as being successful. How is that? How is that possible? In your work, when there's a major struggle that you're going through, and you're so sick of everybody that you work with, and you're sick of the boss, and you just want to leave, you want to quit, and you want to move on. You stop long enough to say, you know what, God? I'm going to be content in whose I am. And even through this time, I hate this position, and I hate everything about it, but I'm going to give this to you, and I'm going to act in such a way that I know that you are with me. You lose your position through no fault of your own. Are you going to go out and knock things over and badmouth the boss and rip everyone a new one and scrape up cars and key them and all those other kind of things? Or will you make the decision to say, you know what, God, through this all, I'm just going to trust you. I'm going to act in such a way that I know that you are with me. In school, when you're put down and you're thrown into detention when everyone else did the wrong stuff and you did nothing wrong, and people make fun of you for your faith, and you have to sit by yourself at times. You don't get to go to all the cool parties, which really aren't that cool anyway. And you start looking around and you're like, you know what, everyone's got all these other friends and I have one, or I have two. You look at it like, you know what, I'm just going to do what everyone else does because that's what everyone else is doing. Or do you stop up and say, wow, God, you blessed me enough with this one person to walk alongside of me, and I'm going to be content in that enough to know that you are with me. How is it we react in those life moments? When we have a loss, when we get a phone call we weren't expecting, when there's something that changes with the economy, when we get transferred to a new state, when we don't have a position, when people make fun of us because of our faith and in our walk. When we have those moments where we are anxious, when we worry, when we rest in past regrets, when we make terrible decisions that we know that God would have nothing to do with, how is it that we react in those moments? Because this is a 17-year-old kid who's in prison, who's been sold into slavery twice by his own family because they hated him that much. And yet Joseph lived in such a way that every non-believer around him knew that the Lord was with him. Turn your Bibles, God bless you, please, to Colossians chapter 3, verse 7. What's our takeaway? Because we're going to ask the question, now what? Today you're going to ask the question, now what? Tomorrow you're going to ask the question, now what? I'm in my car and I'm driving to work and people are driving me crazy and I'm in rush hour traffic and someone's cutting me off and I've got a choice. I'm either going to smile or I'm going to do something I shouldn't do. I'm either going to stop or I'm going to say something I shouldn't say. How am I going to react? And the thing about it is we think that this is one of those examples, like with Joseph, that would never happen. We're like, yeah, that's one of those stories. I just don't see it happening in the real world. It's not something that's realistic. It's not something I can really relate to. I have a friend of mine that we've been meeting for the last few weeks. And I love the time that I have with him. Because we can relate to one another. We talk and we laugh and we talk about God and we talk about other things. We talk about our wives. He makes fun of his wife, and I just say great things about mine. We only have great things to say about her. I'm just kidding. He doesn't really do that. We talk about, the important things and how it relates to our life. Well, he just got back from Afghanistan. And so he was there for 105 days. And partway through, the only way that we could really communicate was through Facebook. And it was just brief stuff. And all he wrote to me was, man, do I have some things I have to tell you. And so when he got back, I couldn't wait to see him. And whenever I would see him, I would always say, this is kind of a little saying he taught me. And he was taught this by his wife. His wife taught him this. She would say to him, looking good, feeling good, must be Hollywood. So that's what I would say to him. Hey man, looking good. He'd say, feeling good. He'd say, must be Hollywood. But when he got back, he was so beat up, I was like, man, he's looking tan. He's feeling bland. And please don't ever go back to Afghanistan. It was bad. And for the first 2 or 3 times we were together, that's how it was. But God brought someone into his life that could relate to what he had been through. And this guy had been in Afghanistan. And of all the places, they met where he would work. And so they came together and he talked with this guy. And because of it, he was able to get him out of these doldrums. I couldn't do it. I mean, I talked to him about God and we discussed God and we had these great conversations that were going on. But there was someone that could relate to him because he had been where he had been. They had something that they could talk about that they understood. I was as understanding as I could be. I could listen and we could talk, but I just felt like every time I'm like, man, God, am I giving him anything that is helping him right now? And he would lie to me and say, hey, that really helped me a lot. I appreciate that. And we'd have these conversations. He wasn't really lying to me, but it was just little stuff. It was that little stuff that kind of helped him through. But this guy who had been where he was, who could relate to the things that were going on, all of a sudden it turned him around. Because he could have these conversations. And they could vent to one another. And they could have discussion. And this is why when people grieve, they need people that go through like-minded issues. He was telling me about how there was a group that gets together that deals with PTSD. And whenever these guys get together, they separate based on the different conflict they were in. So the guys that were in Vietnam go and sit with the guys that were in Vietnam. And the guys that were in Desert Storm go sit with the guys that were in Desert Storm. And the guys that have been to Iraq go deal with the guys that have been in Iraq. And the guys that have been in Afghanistan, they go deal with the guys that have been in Afghanistan. And it helps them to grow together. It helps them talk about those things and the other guys can relate to it. And it helps them to get out of those doldrums. And it helps them to take that next step. And as a believer, it allows them the chance to walk as if the Lord is with them. Because they meet and they come together not because of who they are, but because of whose they are. God brought them through that dark time. And in your life, you're going to go through a dark time. It is guaranteed. That is our world in which we live. But those struggles that you have, those things that you went through, those things that you didn't understand and you cannot even understand still to this day, there's a part of you that struggles with it because you're like, come on, God, where were you? Do you look at it and say, did I act in such a way that I acted as if the Lord was with me? Because I'm going to ask that question, well, now what? Now what? You can act in such a way that the Lord is with you. And here are the words that Paul shares with each of us in Colossians chapter 3, verse 17. He says this. This is how we take the step. Whatever you do, anything you do, in any moment, in the hallways, in the communities, in your workplace, while you're driving your car, while you're at the baseball field, while you're coaching, while you're teaching, whatever it is that you do, in the quiet time in your home, in the moments with your kids, in that special time with your spouse, when it's just you two finally on a date together, in whatever you do, whether in word or deed, do all of it in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through Him. In other words, in all you say and in all you do, I am going to walk knowing that the Lord is with me. Hold on a second. You don't know the struggles I'm having. I don't. I may not. You don't know my past. I probably don't. You don't know my present. You don't know who it is that I have to deal with. You don't know my struggles. You don't know about the addiction. You don't know about how much I struggle when I'm on my own, the websites I go to that I know that I shouldn't go to. I may not know this, but I know this. I do know this for sure. At some point in some time, you've got to stop long enough to ask this question. Now what? People are putting me down. People are making fun of me. People are wanting to knock me around. Now what? And then make the decision on your own, you personally, to say, I today choose to walk in such a way that I know God is with me. I know it. I'm not thinking about it. It might be an option. I know that He is with me. It's a choice you and I make, no matter what's on or what's at the other end. So now what? Now you have that opportunity to make a decision. Jeff's going to come up and the praise team's going to come up and they're going to just play a little bit of music just for a little bit. But I want you to think about Joseph for a second. Joseph who didn't have his Bible. Joseph who couldn't speak the language. Joseph who didn't have anyone to turn to. Joseph who didn't have a family there. Joseph who there was no possible way that he could turn to anyone. And yet he lived his life in such a way that everyone around him knew the Lord was with him. And so when you get to that moment, today, tomorrow, this week, and that question comes up, well, now what? Job loss? Phone call we didn't want? Kids getting in trouble? Spouse is angry? The words I say are words I shouldn't be saying? In all those struggles, I'm going to stop long enough to say, I can do all of these things. I can work through all these things when I choose to walk in such a way that I know the Lord is with me. Jeff's going to go ahead and play once again here just for a little bit. I want you to just take this in for just a moment. Think about what the 17-year-old kid taught each one of us today. And think about today where you can be, as a believer, the hope and the light that you can share by just knowing that the Lord is with you. This is your time. You just bow your heads. You just rest for a little bit. Just relax wherever you're at. It's a moment where you can just talk to God. Make the decision to say, in all I say and in all I do, I'm going to do so because I know the Lord is with